So there's something I'm struggling with. And I guess I'll say it this way to start. The conversations I have on this show start around what's the value? What's the value that's most important to you and guides your life, is how I phrase it. And I ask that because to me, that's the most important question if we're going to have a conversation. And I say that because if we're going to have a conversation that's beneficial, useful, worthwhile in any way, it has to be an honest, genuine conversation. And for it to be honest and genuine, we have to be clear about what we value, how we view the world, what matters to us, and what kind of framework we're using to formulate our beliefs, make our decisions, take our actions. Because then it kind of lays the foundation, it lays it all out. So now we can talk. I understand you a little bit better. You understand me. We can now conversate. We can ask questions, but it's all rooted in understanding what you value. So that's why I asked that question. Now, inevitably, in most of the conversations I have, when we have the conversation and I start asking the questions and we talk about the value, I continuously am trying to push to get to kind of like a root level, first principles basis of what that value is and what it means and how it guides somebody's life. And sometimes it's, faith, belief in God or some sort of spirituality. Sometimes it's legacy and being successful. Sometimes it's compassion or kindness, trust, helping society improve, all these different things, which are all great, amazing things, by the way. The problem I have is when pushed, and this is true for me and anybody, this isn't a knock on anybody I've spoken to, but when you push that, when you press it, inevitably you hit a point that says, I don't know why, right? Like, why does that value matter to you? Why is that a good thing? And there's a few first level answers of like, well, because that's, the way I was raised or what I was taught or through experiences I had or, the religious belief that I have or the faith that I have tells me this. And then you keep pushing, right? And what I like to do is say, well, what about this? Have you considered this? Wouldn't this disprove that or wouldn't this not work in that structure? And sometimes people find that annoying and I get that. But it usually hits a point where people say in some form or another, like, well, you could question all of that. Like at some point, you just have to take a leap of faith, not literally to God or religion, but a leap of faith that says, I can't question any further. I'm never going to know for sure that what I'm doing is the right thing or that it works or that it's 100% logical or that it's 100% right or the truth, but I have to go with something. And on the one hand, I get that completely. And I understand that there's not always answers to life and that we have to take some actions. But what I'm struggling with is, if you can't, rhetorical you, right? Me, anybody, if we can't get to the root answer and be clear and grounded in something to say, this is why I have conviction on this. This is why I value this. This is why I believe it, right? If we can't do that, if we stop at some point and say, well, we can keep asking questions forever and it just, what's the point? What does any of it mean then? What is it grounded in? What is it based on? And that's the struggle I have, is I don't know that it's okay that we're willing to say, at some point, you just got to stop questioning and you just got to do it. I mean, I get it. Practically, you do have to do something in theory, right? Even nothing is something. But then how do you have conviction about it? Because if you don't even know what it's grounded in, what it means, what it's about, why at the deepest level, why that's the thing that you value most, it seems like it's just guesswork then. Now, I'm sure I'm thinking of this in ways that that maybe aren't logical, and somebody can question this and debate this, and that's kind of my intent. And I know some people would say, like, there's not always answers to questions in the world. And that, again, that may be true. But the logical kind of paradox I find myself in, the problem I have is, if that is true, right? And it could be anything, right? I spoke to somebody who was a psychic medium. I spoke to somebody who believed in like alternative medicine, kind of tremor therapy. I've spoken to people that believe in God. I've spoken to people that believe in all sorts of different things. It doesn't matter what the thing is. But if that is true, that there's not answers to these questions, how do you have so much conviction for what you value? To me, it would seem, if it's not really grounded in anything, there's a chance today you're a psychic medium or you're a business person looking to be successful and change the world. And tomorrow, maybe because it's not rooted in anything, you could just as easily be a cowboy or a clerk at 7-Eleven or whatever, right? It doesn't matter because none of it is grounded in anything. And maybe that's the struggle and the problem I have in life is that I'm constantly looking for that answer and that grounding, because to me, how do you make sense of any of it? What do you do with any of it, right? There's a Tolstoy quote that I posted yesterday, which is something along the lines of, if I don't know what I am and why I'm here, then life's impossible. And again, impossible is a strong word, but I think the sentiment is exactly this. If I don't have the answers to the most basic foundational questions of why, and it's grounded in something of what this whole thing is, well, then what the hell am I supposed to do? What does any decision matter or mean? And the only logical conclusion I could come to, right? And again, based on these conversations, I've probably done 40 of them now. Usually when we hit that stopping point, right, and that leap of faith is made, and I say, but why? But why there? Why are you taking the leap of faith there? Why not be a cowboy or a clerk at 7-Eleven? It almost always, maybe literally always, I'd have to check, but I think literally always, it comes back to because it feels good for me. Again, whether it's belief in God, helping people, psychic, whatever it is, because it feels good and right for me. And it seems like, in the weirdest of ways, the only thing that we can ground ourselves in is kind of the most subjective thing. The only thing that really is real and tangible that we can grasp onto and say, this is why I'm doing this, this is why I'm living the life the way I'm living it, is because it feels good for us. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how I feel about that. And I mean that genuinely. I'm not passing a value judgment on it. On the one hand, it makes sense, right? You do what feels good for you. That's the guide. That's what makes sense. We're all trying to be happy in whatever form that is. For some of us, happiness is in suffering and killing ourselves, running 200 miles or whatever. It's whatever your form of happiness is, but you do it because it feels good for you. Now, there's another view which says, well, then we're all just selfish. The only thing we're grounded in, the only thing that matters in our life, the only thing we really value is feeling good. Some of us look at different time horizons. We view it in different ways, but it all comes back to that. And that's kind of a crazy thought because, again, it's so subjective. And maybe that's the point, right? Maybe that's why for me and for a lot of people, it's that idea of thoughtful authenticity. All you can do is do what feels good for you. But you should try and be as thoughtful about it as possible. You should challenge yourself to make sure that you're not doing something that's short-sighted or that's hurting somebody else. But at the end of the day, if you don't care about hurting somebody else and it feels good for you, well, then maybe you shouldn't care. I don't know. These are big philosophical questions, but it all comes back to this thread of, if we value something, don't we have to know at the most fundamental root level why we value it? Otherwise, it doesn't really have meaning. And if we follow that thread, the only thing that we can really say with any certainty that has meaning for us is that we like feeling good. And where do we go from there? I don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out through more episodes.